Oh, your stream has started, but there was issues with what?
What are you reading a comment?
No, I think we're live now. Hold on here now. Let me see.
All right, I'm gonna pull it up on YouTube and see what the quality's like. This is crazy, man.
Can
Can't we
we?
just catch a break here?
I literally was going to say the same thing.
Oh,
Oh, I think we're good.
all right, we're good. We're good. I don't know what that was. All right,
I literally was going to say the same thing.
so let's take it from the top here.
Okay, so foreign and domestic, episode number 18. I am your host, Patrick Cleary, with my co host, Ramon Mile. This is our for Funky Friday freestyle redo. Whatever, we're going to throw more things onto it. But yeah, we're going to chop it up over some things that have kind of popped up. Nothing that we've done a deep dive on, but enough that we can chat about and, get our teeth into. So, Ramon, let's try this again.
Yep.
No
All
glitching
right.
this time now, okay?
All right, so I'm going to preface this again the same way I did before. We had something else planned this week. It fell through. We couldn't get our guest on, but we will be returning soon. It's on the hush hush. We can't, it's a secret, so you guys will know when you need to know. But as I was explaining before, pardon the stream issues. Yeah, so even with all, there's been a ton of news today. Freestyle Fridays is what me and Patrick do. We kind of just like, pick through the news cycle, see what jumps out, see what useful political analysis we can garner for you guys. And like I was saying, we had the G7 conference starting up today. That's probably the biggest political event that's going to happen in the next 3 days. But
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, the controversy around the House Foreign Affairs Committee, they had a hearing, and Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, was being questioned by committee members, and my favorite, Ilhan Omar, came with the absolute fire, asking this man some questions.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, basically what happened is, if anybody's been paying attention to Anthony Blinken, our commentary on him, I watched that actually, Patter. I watched that Axios episode.
Yeah.
He was on that you were mentioning to me,
Yep.
and before we get into this actual story, like I got to give the guy a little credit. He is actually like for one of the just establishment type guys. He's never really gonna say anything that rocks the boat. He actually does have a little bit of charisma. Like
Oh,
he
he's able
doesn't.
to navigate the questions that a State Department head would have to.
Right. But he
It's
delivers the
coy.
bullshit in a way that makes you feel like he's answering, and a lot
Yeah.
of people aren't even able to do that. So
Right.
just tip of
Yeah.
the hat to the guy.
Kudos.
Game respects game. You know what I mean? Like it's my job, I think, to see through all that. And there were
Yeah.
a couple times in the interview he had me
Enamored.
yeah, like Obama used to do, like Obama.
Yeah.
You know.
A hook line.
So yeah, so like I said, in the State Department Foreign Policy Strategy and Fiscal 2022 budget request hearing, Senate Secretary of State Anthony Blinken took questions from committee members. So Omar posed him the question, saying, "You oppose the court, talking about the ICC, the International
Mm-hmm.
Criminal Court. You oppose the court's investigation in both Palestine and Afghanistan." In both, she's referring to the Afghanistan war, folks, which we're still there, supposed to be pulling troops out.
Yeah.
And she continued, quote, "In both of these cases, if domestic courts can't or won't pursue justice, and we oppose the ICC, where do we think victims are supposed to go for justice? And what justice mechanisms do you support for them?" And Blinken responded with a pretty obfuscating answer, which again, you're not going to, Secretary of State's not going to honestly answer any of these things in a committee because it's the minutes, it's all being recorded.
Yeah.
He responds with, quote, "Whether it's the United States or Israel, we both have the mechanisms to make sure that there is accountability in any situations where there are concerns about the use of force and human rights." Yeah, and that was it. He just gave that little simple, yeah, we can handle our own stuff internally.
Yeah.
So Patter, after the intro, this is a sprawling topic for me. I figured it'd be something good, like not like I know we're Freestyle Friday, but I figured we could spend like a good like 15, 20 minutes on this because this actually gets really expansive and attaches
Yeah.
to something that we touched on in episode 16. So here I'll lay something out for you to play off of. So The reason this is a problem, folks, is because immediately after this hearing, Ilhan Omar, well, not immediately after, but I believe it was later that day, she posted a video on Twitter, sort of repeating and clarifying what she was saying. Before, now, this was before, so when that interview happened, a bunch of people actually within the establishment, the Democratic Party, leadership, and whatnot, had immediately put out some statements there because they were being asked by reporters, like, oh, what
Uh-huh.
about what Ilhan Omar said? And they gave a couple little media hits, but after Ilhan Omar went on Twitter, the frenzy began. Everyone started losing their mind. Tom Cotton, Republican senator, basically told her to go back to Somalia.
Yeah.
A ton of Democratic Party folks in the House, basically said, "Oh, this is par for the course for Ilhan Omar, calling her
Yeah.
anti-Semitic, blah blah blah." And you heard what my quote was. She was basically just saying, if America doesn't respect the ICC, and we also won't do anything about our own people who are blatantly committing war crimes, like what recourse do you recommend for these people?
Right.
A super honest question to ask a
Mm-hmm.
Secretary of State that's in your hearing. Now remember, like, keep that in perspective. That's her hearing. He's in the chair. He's answering questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She's an elected official. He's just a guy he's an appointee. You know what I mean? So he has to answer her questions. That's the whole point. That's what you're going in there for. And he didn't give one. But this connects very heavily to what we were talking about before. But here, Patter, I'll let you roll into it. Tell me what you thought.
Well, yeah. I mean, I messaged you yesterday, kind of just, have you seen what's going on with that? And I'd seen on Twitter that she was trending, and normally when she trends, she's very passionate and she's very to the point with her sentences. And I think the fact that it's coming from a Muslim woman really ticks off a certain element, not only on the right but on the left. We often talk about how Stonewall liberals often think that they're pure as the driven snow, and everything is good to go. But there's certain things like Israel or any critique of it that they fall in line and use that same line of speaking that they've been using for years when anybody tries to question what's going on there. And it was good to see plenty of people backing Ilhan Omar after she made those comments. I mean, but what was almost comical as well, though, was the fact that Democrats publicly, leading Democrats publicly, came out like obviously chastising her.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so funny about that is that they fail so many times to actually do something to stand up for people, especially as we're seeing the whole debacle around the Republicans playing slow game and just basically trying to run out the clock. Where's the tough talk and kind of the chastising there? That's what's frustrating about something like this. And honestly, everything that she said, I'd agree with 110%. Like, I think most people outside of America look at America's history, and you can talk about World War II. Obviously they were part of the Allied forces, but they didn't single-handedly take down Nazi Germany. But from that, you could count, you might be able to count the amount of times that they have imposed, coups in other countries and destabilized regions. I mean, that stuff is known now. It's no longer conspiracy. I mean, we've had hearings on it, and it just goes to show that sometimes, everything can be already out in the open, but this deniability game is not just from, Republicans who think that Trump won the election. The deniability game goes throughout, American politics on different issues.
Trump didn't invent it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But timing is everything with this, and off the back of, as we discussed, how different kind of the talk was with this most recent war in Israel and Palestine. I think she did get chastised and kind of reamed out by, top members of the party, but plenty of people came out to defend her and say, like, where's the lie?
Right.
Where's the lie? I
Now,
mean, you look at.
here, I have this here, right? So I have, though you were mentioning before how she got chastised, I have the joint press release
Yeah.
from Democratic leadership. This is Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, James Clyburn, Hakeem Jeffries, the regular cast, all these clowns. They came together and wrote a joint statement that said, quote, legitimate criticism of the policies of both the United States and Israel is protected by the values of free speech and democratic debate. So right there off the bat, wrong. No, not legitimate criticism. All criticism is protected by
Right.
the values of free speech.
Yeah.
So let's lock that in right there, because immediately in that first sentence, they're showing their hand. Because folks, we talked about this before. APAC, anti-BDS legislation in southern states. There's a lot of Democrats who wanted to do things like that in blue states like New York and California. Okay, so when they're saying like legitimate criticism, what they're saying is legitimate considered by us.
Right.
Not legitimate. There's no qualifier for what is legitimate or not when it comes to free speech. There's only, are you inciting violence or not? That's it. There is no other qualifier for legitimacy. So they continue. And indeed, such criticism is essential to the strength and health of democracies. But drawing false equivalences between democracies like the United States and Israel and groups that engage in terrorism like Hamas and the Taliban foments prejudice and undermines progress toward a future of peace and security for all. So that like read like a fucking statement like from the Hunger Games or like something crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, drawing false equivalence between democracies and terrorist organizations, to quote, the Irish saying and what you say all the time, like, you dare call me a terrorist, looking down the barrel of your gun. I mean, it really is incredible how they're saying this on the back of a pullout of Afghanistan. For what are we at, 16 years now, 18, something like that. That a bunch of people in our political establishment they're getting pulled out kicking and screaming. There's people still writing op-eds why we shouldn't leave Afghanistan.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Legitimate think tanks pumping shit out like that.
Yeah.
There's been thousands of civilians killed in Afghanistan since the launch of all this. Like legitimate, just like complete misses on drone strikes. No accountability, and it's super basic what Ilhan Omar's talking about here, folks. Like, this isn't controversial at all. This is the Democratic Party targeting one of their own who consistently speaks out against their propaganda. That's all that this is. You know what I mean? That's really all it is. She rips the mask off of the face of what the Democratic Party is actually behind when it comes to foreign policy and how they operate in lockstep with these vicious Republicans who just say it out loud and don't, say it with niceties. It's really just that simple.
Right. And I mean, and not to like go back in time and beat the dead horse, but like, Eisenhower said it and warned it on one of his last speeches about the military-industrial complex, and between the CIA and, the military itself, I mean, sure, America has done a lot of good in the world, but I mean, you could argue, the blood that's on America's hands for its development in different areas of the world to protect interests and, create more interests have done a lot of damage to geopolitics in the world in general. I mean,
for sure.
We already know that, if we're to look at it honestly, we know that potentially, Tony Blair and Bush are war criminals. So why is it such a leap then? Why is this such a leap for... And what's funny is when... And I get it myself. Now, I'm not a refugee to America, so I can't really speak at it as from a black refugee from Somalia who came here, and now is a member of Congress, which, that is beautiful. That is the beautiful thing about America. Those are the things that should be celebrated. But I often get it as someone, I'm here on a Foreign and Domestic Unfiltered. We talk about America all the time, American politics. But throughout my time here, I always get well, if you don't like it here, if you have such a, a negative view of this, a negative view of that, I'm like, no, I mean, it's good to be critical. I mean, the reason that I'm here is because I care about the place. Obviously, like my wife, my daughter, I live here. So why shouldn't I want it to be better? And at the same time, I'm critical of anything that I see, if I call it out, I see it. And what
I
she's
believe it
saying
was
is,
Benjamin Franklin. True patriotism is criticism of one's own country before another. I believe that was Franklin's quote, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, yeah,
Yes, super true.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it was funny to see the reaction, and it's very dangerous when they beat the drum around Omar, because we already know, the Islamophobia that came off something like 9/11,
Mhm.
that sentiment that grew, and what Tom Cotton said. What did he say? If she doesn't like it that much, she could always go back.
Yeah,
That
go back
is
to Somalia.
that is such. First of all, it's a juvenile response from
Mhm.
someone who's supposed to be like a representative of people. But that's something that I would expect. But yeah, I thought that it was an interesting back and forth between both. Obviously the people you'd expect it from,
Right.
and then members of our own caucus.
So the little snippet I had here too, just to like give some hardcore recent evidence, because I feel like when people hear about Afghanistan, they only remember like the hardcore, like the waves of invasion and stuff like that. This is continued on. I have right here from an article from foreignpolicy.com. Last November, an American Reaper drone targeted a group of villagers in the mountainous area of Afghanistan's southeastern province in Paktia and killed 7 of them. Paktia has long been home to Taliban militants, but local residents say that all the victims were civilians, including 3 women and 1 child. They had gone to the remote area to graze cattle and collect wood,
Yeah,
and then suddenly they were dead. So, again, I just want to lock that into context. Last November, folks, 2020, pandemic. Pandemic.
yeah,
They're still drone striking people in Afghanistan and getting it wrong.
yeah,
This has been going on for almost 2 decades, and the people in our political establishment have the fucking nutsack to tell this woman that she's being disingenuous, that she's being anti-Semitic. First off, no one had any rebuttal about the Afghanistan thing. That's what I think is amazing, right?
yeah, yeah.
Because she clearly said, like, she was comparing America and Israel, clearly doing harm around the world,
Mm-hmm.
clearly doing what the International Criminal Court would consider terrorist acts. You're killing civilians. That's the definition of terrorism. You're using an ideology or a political or religious ideology to inflict harm or kill others who oppose that.
Yeah,
Okay? Now, just because a nation state does it doesn't make it not terrorism in the sense of the verb.
right.
Okay? The sense of the verb. You can't call a nation state a terrorist organization, a noun, because they set the rules for that. You know what I mean? Like, me and Pat are calling the CIA a terrorist organization doesn't really mean anything, because I can't classify them that way. They classify themselves. But when you're telling me that you just smoked 3 women and a kid, that were like on a mountain path grazing, you can see who's there.
Yeah,
They're walking goats, dude. Like, you smoke them. And one of our Congress people actually has the compassion, the humanity, the empathy to be able to relate with these people and speaks about it. And immediately everyone gets upset and pissed off and freaks out. And again, only wants to frame it within the context of, oh, well, we've called you anti-Semitic in the past, so we're just going to roll over it with that. No response for the Afghanistan. I just wanted to point that out because I didn't even know that. That was shocking. I was like, how are we still operating drones in Afghanistan to take out the Taliban? The Taliban hasn't even been, no one in our military establishment even talks about the Taliban anymore. There's been talks recently about pulling out, about all of around our foreign policy. Blinken said it. Pompeo said it before him, where they talked about there's a realistic situation. Like, okay, we pull out of Afghanistan, like the Taliban's still going to control a bunch of stuff. Like, we're just going to have to deal with that they're there. Okay, so if that's
yeah,
the case, if you're doing that math on you're looking at those moves on your chessboard and understanding that, okay, we got to get out of here. We milked this for all we had. We got all the heroin, folks.
yeah,
Because that's what they were there for, and oil.
mm-hmm.
But you're still drone striking people. Like, it really is shocking. I didn't know that, and I was just like, man, it's just sad. It
Right.
really is just sad that you have people. And think about those people operating those drones. Like, you're just like out in a fucking desert bunker somewhere, and you got orders like, oh, hit this target, and you fly it up. You have to see who these like. It's just people walking goats.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. I feel like all of this talk around what we talk about with national politics and foreign policy, that it gets so large that, like, oh, those are just seven people. And
Right.
it's like, you can't lose sight of that, man. Like,
Right.
we freak out when a kid gets killed in some horrific fashion. Perfect example: a girl got shot in Albany a couple weeks ago. Was she 14? She was my one of my good buddies I used to work with. It was his daughter's best friend,
Wow.
and that echoed to the point
Right.
where he told me the story, and I felt horrible about it. I know
Yeah.
his daughter a little bit. He felt it. The girl slept over his house. All of these same human connections that we have here exist in other countries. Those are real
Yeah.
people. I know it sounds super simple and
Well,
like I'm oversimplifying it, but it's like I really feel like Americans don't connect these
well,
dots.
it's the American exceptionalism that's been around for so long, and it's the same reason that it has a problem talking about itself, whether it be instances like this, or race, or misogyny, or whatever it is. It has a tough time, pointing at itself and saying, what can we do better? And this reaction doesn't surprise me, but I think, you know, patriotism is one of those things that you hear all the time in America.
Mm-hmm.
Patriotism. What does that actually mean? It certainly means, I guess, a lot of people would think it means you're proud of your country, which, you know, bad people are proud of their bad countries. Good people are proud of their good countries. There's all types of people that make up a country. So distinguishing what a patriot is someone who wants its country to do better, wants its country to, own up and fess up. Much like, and I'm not comparing Nazi Germany to modern day America. I'm not making that leap because, you can't. Even though a lot of people like to compare everything to Nazism. But one thing that Germany does and make sure it recognizes is the atrocities of the Nazi regime, by, teaching it in school, and owning up and fessing up and kind of owning that. But in America, it seems that anytime something is brought up of what they did or where they went wrong, like a perfect example is obviously the drone strike you were talking about. And I'm of the idea now that we're like, it's a poison chalice. It's a tough job to be leader of in America, just because, regardless of what the intention someone like Obama might have had when he went into office, he was given this button saying, hey, you can take out this, potential target here.
Right.
And like you said, you inadvertently, kill some people, and it's kind of brushed off as, just some of the, the reality, the harsh reality of war. But the
Yeah.
reality is that, by changing the game yet again with the ability just to indiscriminately drop these things, it lowers the humanity of these people. And you
It's
know
sanitized warfare
yeah,
because
yeah, it's
no
far
one
away
actually
from
shot.
us.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
one shot them. We didn't stab them. It was just an oopsie.
yeah,
It was an accident. But the thing is, at the end of the day, a life was lost, and that's what should matter. It doesn't matter what the intention is,
mm-hmm.
and that's sort of the disgusting thing about modern warfare and advanced weaponry is, I listen to like historians and podcasts and stuff where people talk about like, like ancient time war and how a lot of the same tactics that they like the Romans, for example, used to invoke, or I'm sorry, the Persians used to invoke like it was the Romans, decimation. If they ever ran away in a
Mm-hmm.
battle, that unit every 1 out of 10 people, the rest of the unit had to kill 1 out of every 10
Right.
of their comrades to ensure they wouldn't turn around again. And you read war psychologists of American soldiery, people who train soldiers in America throughout the 20th century, and all over all these modern countries, Britain, France, whatever, and they all had the same issues, right? There's a certain percentage of people inevitably in a military that aren't going to be able to stomach killing someone.
Right.
There's always going to be someone who won't pull the trigger or will run. And advanced weaponry kind of takes the psychology out of that. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And then at the same time, it has that other benefit of, it allows the media to write about it as, it was 6 targets were drone struck. You know
Right.
what I mean? You
Yep.
can't you can't call it a target when a unit rolls in and shoots 3 women and a
Right.
kid.
Right.
You know what I mean? It allows you to deliver it in a different way where it's softer.
Right.
And I attribute a lot of that. Like I said, this advanced weaponry, the sanitization of war. But the thing is, at the end of the day, again, folks, we have to keep the perspective of it's not sanitized for them there. It's still dead people.
Right.
It's still dead. It's still bombs.
Right.
Okay. And I mean, I know I talk about it all the time, but it really is so disgusting. Not only the fact that it happens, but the very few people that we actually have that have power in this country that have the stones to speak up about this, and you see how easily and readily people will just tear them to pieces.
Yep.
Will take any opportunity to try to take them out, to take them out at the knees, and it's so obvious, man. But
Well,
I want to pivot. Oh, okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say. I mean, America. I think the world knows, and quite a big handful now of Americans think that the U.S. needs to, obviously look at what Omar is saying and have some ownership of that. But then they also need to kind of look at the advocacy they have for Israel as well. I mean, we're talked about it, a few weeks in a row, but this again is another instance of, proof is in the pudding, and you know, denying the need for an ICC trial, like and then also like advocating for what Israel has been doing, and denying the need for a trial on them as well, when clearly the consensus within the world is, yeah, bad things happen and continue to happen. Let's take a look from a court that was set up after some of the biggest atrocities this world has ever seen.
Right. That America opposed, by the way, at
Yeah.
its onset, opposed it at first. I think they didn't. America didn't accept ICC authority until Clinton, which was like years later. Because you're talking about the Hague.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like after, yeah. But no, it's interesting too because like we talk about it all the time. Like America sees itself, its citizens, and its government. They view themselves as like the moral arbiters of this globe.
Yeah.
And it's like you're one of like a handful of countries. Even Russia accepted the ICC, the country that we demonize. It's us, China, um, what is it, England? There's only like 5 countries, and they're all our allies
Yeah.
that don't accept ICC authority. And it's like, so okay, but this is an international body of people who all signed an agreement, countries that signed an agreement saying, okay, in case there's any foul play or anyone becomes too powerful to the point where they're able to shrug off all responsibility or accountability on a global level, we're going to create this organization that can at least bring forward these issues to even be talked about. You know what I mean? Like, and it makes so much sense. Like, if you remember when Ilhan Omar was pressing Elliot Abrams back in the Trump administration, you know what I mean? Like, she went at him. She was like, hey, you committed war crimes. Why should we believe anything you
Right.
said?
Right.
He literally got charged, folks. Okay, and pardoned. He was a perfect example of a guy who had war crimes charged against him in America, flexed its muscle, and was like, nope, we ain't nobody gets extradited from America, right? So,
Yeah.
and I get that from a nation state standpoint because that's just one more way you're flexing on people.
Mm-hmm.
You're just showing them like, don't try us. We won't even let you prosecute people that we know murdered children. It's a flex.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, you're going to sit there and act like you're that moral arbiter, but you want everyone else, Anthony Blinken, I'm not saying him personally, but he holds the standard for a government that refuses to participate in moral equivalence of humanity across borders. They will not accept that concept legally. They will not accept it. They'll say it. They'll use the words.
Yeah.
The words mean nothing. They will not accept any legal consequence for someone from our military, mind you, military. Like if me or Patter goes over to one of these countries and shoots somebody in the head, they're gonna let us go. Like, well, I guess you're in prison in fucking Thailand for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
They won't care. But if it's someone that they send a mission on a mission or whatever, or a drone strike, hey, well, that's war.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a legal war.
Right.
But here, we were getting stuck. I want to pivot real quick to the part that me and you talked about, the actual discourse part of this.
Yeah.
Now that we've introed it a little bit. So I read to you guys the statement that Democratic House leadership put out on Ilhan Omar, and she tweeted another tweet. They asked for her to clarify her comments. She did. She basically just repeated the same thing and said, yeah, of course I'm not comparing two sovereign countries that have court systems to Hamas and
Right.
the Taliban. Like, sure, but
Yeah.
in my opinion, she watered it down a little bit. But I get it. She has massive pressure. She has very few allies. But so the next problem that I see here is I read a bunch of different people. So like some people came to her defense, Linda Sarsour, some media figures and stuff. But the common refrain I keep seeing was highlighted right here. Rashida Tlaib, she tweeted, "Freedom of speech doesn't exist for Muslim women in Congress. The benefit of the doubt doesn't exist for Muslim women in Congress. House Democratic leadership should be ashamed of its relentless, exclusive tone of policing a congresswoman of color." So I posted about this today. This nags me because sure, I'm not saying the things that she said aren't problems, right? We obviously know, like as Patter referred to before, there's a ton of people who are Islamophobic in the U.S. Congress, like actively, openly will tell you. You know what I mean? Like without question.
Yep.
But my issue is this: we're immediately all of the squad basically all responded in a similar fashion, where it's very, very reminiscent of what we talked about in episode 16, where I was trying to refer to this concept around like the sympathy economy. The left overwhelmingly in response to this in defense of Ilhan Omar, rather than sticking to the topic, the point, like how me and Patter just broke down the truth of what she was saying.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We're attributing and giving evidence to how America and Israel have done terroristic acts to civilians in other countries that are in opposition to them. Whether they're people who live next to the quote unquote terrorists Israel and America are attacking, makes no difference.
No.
You still killed civilians, plain and simple. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else left to be said.
Right.
There needs to be accountability there. But the problem is this pivot to immediately saying, "Oh, she's Muslim. They're doing this to her. She's a woman. They're doing this to her." I have a huge problem with that because what the establishment basically did after she said this, Democratic establishment, they heard everything she said. Anthony Blinken was sweating in that fucking chair when she said that. And establishment Democrats immediately came out and the media echoed them and said, "Oh, look, squirrel. Look
Mm-hmm.
over there. Look over there.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-Semitism. Don't talk about what she said. Talk about stupid social shit. Don't do that. Don't talk
Right.
about
Substance.
us murdering people." And the left immediately played into it by countering back with, "Oh yeah, well, you can't. She's a woman of color. She's Muslim, and that's bad because you're silencing her and using all this. It's not just Rashida. It's a bunch of other stuff I read. People using that same language. And the problem is, it's like, okay, you're playing, and you jumped right into their arena. They built a coliseum for you to spar in, and rather than you being in the iron solid steel cage of your argument that you're completely right in, you stepped out of that and hopped into their stage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it, man. I really don't get it. And I was having a conversation with my sister-in-law earlier today about this because I was kind of trying to work it out. And it's just like I at this point I feel like this is just part of the, like we talked about, this is like the lexicon of what discourse is now. Like people can't help themselves but frame everything in this way. Like immediately whenever someone is disagreed with or being attacked, it doesn't matter where they lie politically. Everyone reflexively goes to, "I'm a trans, bi, gay, woman of color, whatever, blah, 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 blah." And it has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Right.
Now, it does for some of the people who habitually attack Ilhan Omar, but it has nothing to do with the topic at hand.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
It can stand on its own by itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. And it's political strategy and how the left has no coherence around when you want to circle the wagons around someone that is right and is trying to expand your ideological worldview to more people, because that's the goal here, right? Politics, you want more people to agree with you. That's how you change foreign policy. You have to win elections by getting more people who think like you, make your thinking popular.
Yep.
You're not going to do that with these types of responses. You're just not. Because people see that as weak. People were going to see that as, "Oh, that's just how everyone talks now," and they turn their brain off. Rather than you taking the opportunity to continue to drill Anthony Blinken. Why not? They already hate you. because
Well,
you
it's
wouldn't
easy.
you
It's easy to do that now. I mean, it's easy to turn it into something else. And like I said, it's a great diversionary tactic from the actual substance of what's been said. But I think it's playing its course right now. I don't think, you know, the thought even of someone in Congress putting these questions to a Secretary of State, 8 years ago you couldn't see that because everybody was in lockstep, you know.
Mhm.
So there's progress there, and I think the reaction from a lot of people that towards Omar being right will embolden her a little bit, and she's going to continue to chirp, rightfully so, and hopefully more get behind what she's saying, and it's it is quite rich to see that reaction from leadership towards her. But yeah, I think we've ringed that one out and got our point
Oh yeah.
across on that.
Oh yeah.
I just saw breaking news right now. The DOJ Inspector General is launching an investigation into Trump era data seizure.
Mhm.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I was reading up on that a little bit. I noticed how when the story first broke, like five, it wasn't like detailed, but there was I think Saki was asked about it like four
Mm-hmm.
days ago, or was it five? It was a while ago. It was earlier in the week. Um, the Biden administration has managed to wriggle themselves out of any involvement with that, even though they were aware and just weren't talking about it.
Well, they seized
But
them
yeah, you want to
data,
break
wasn't
down?
it? Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like
yeah. I was gonna say you want to break down
the
what you.
Trump era seizure of phone data from House Democrats in 2018. The Associated Press is reporting. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco asked the department's Inspector General to open the investigation on Friday. A senior Justice Department official told the AP after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin demanded the Trump era attorneys Barr and Sessions testify about the seizures. Which is interesting because I did see back when Barr was under the lights and the cameras and getting asked by Harris, of all people, about whether he was asked to specifically open up an investigation on members of Congress, and he didn't answer.
Right, right. Yeah,
Um,
Bill Barr, he almost perjured himself like 40 times
yeah,
during his tenure,
yes,
and he was slick with it. He
yeah.
was slick with it.
I mean, he knows what he can and can't say, and that's why he was careful with how he chose his words.
Yeah.
But
People
you know,
forget he was a mastermind behind Bush v. Gore. He was a legal mind behind a ton of Republican power moves in the last 30 years.
yep,
So that's a sharp man. Very Steve Bannon-esque. One of the knights in the back row of the chessboard, just hopping around, fucking shit up.
yeah. And this was all under the background of it, on the backdrop of like the Russia investigation. So does that tell you that the Trump was nervous or what they were finding out, or was he just trying to get something to? I don't know. I'm sure all the resistance movement will be up in arms about this. Like, look, it's another instance why Trump is gross, but
Right.
you could tell there was probably going to be more things like this pop out, and there'll continue to be. I think by the time my daughter is my age, all of the dust will have settled on these last 8 years, and
Oh yeah.
God knows what will be out
Can
in the
you
open.
can you imagine? Well, first off, I'll say they're gonna release like Trump's presidential like record stuff, like probably record fast compared to any president in
Yeah, I
history.
think so.
But yeah, when they do start unleashing that, I can't. It's gonna be a nice little Easter egg, folks. Like Patter said, we're gonna be like me and Patter are gonna be like 50, 55, and it's all just gonna dump, or like all at once, and it'll just be all these just wonderful little clips of just silly Trump, just like doing and saying wild things to world leaders and like people in high levels of our government's administration. But like what I was saying earlier, I think it's interesting how like Saki was questioned about it, and she dodged a little too. She dodged a little too when people were asking like. The initial reporting on it was saying that the Biden administration was aware of it during the transitionary period,
Mm-hmm.
which has to be true. There's no way they wouldn't know because the DOJ is one of the keys that you hand over during a transition.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the transition was rough
Yeah, it was.
So sure, you can give a little credence there, but certainly by the time, I mean, he's been president for what, 4 months now. You would think that unless you were worried about serving up, like for example, if there were people in the DOJ that you wanted to insulate from the blowback from this, and you wanted to keep them in your administration, that would really be the only reason why you wouldn't immediately let people know about this. Like, it's kind of interesting that this is something that, now I believe it was a leak, right?
Um, the New York Times broke the story last night amid the Russian investigation. Subpoenaed Apple for data. Trump had subpoenaed Apple for data from the accounts of Adam Schiff, the
Right.
top Democrat on the committee, and Eric Swalwell.
But I'm saying it was a leak though that broke the story, right? Because it wasn't a release by the DOJ.
No, no, no,
Right?
no, no, no.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So it had to be leaked, and it took that long, which means someone in the DOJ leaked it. Like, let's keep it real. But it's just like it's really weird because, like, why else would you take this long to, like, you could have beaten up on him immediately and settled down a bunch. You could have. There were so many pivot points where this would have been useful for the Biden administration to drop this. You know what I mean? Like, for example, all the rigmarole around, after, oh, he stole the election, for months we were in that discourse. Like, you could have disrupted. He had ammo, he had arrows in his quiver. It's just really
Yeah.
weird that it's like, oh, this is coming out now, like when it's not useful.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Either, like I said, you're trying to protect someone who you're keeping that's a carryover from Trump's DOJ, or you just like don't want to operate that way. But again,
Well,
that's poor politics because you could have used that a while ago. Like,
well, I'd say the reality of it is like in the wake of the mess of the last fucking 8 years, 4 years, 5 years, or even I don't even know how long it's been a mess, but in the wake of all that, there's just so many probably ways. I mean, we heard some of the calls that Trump were on that he really got impeached for.
yeah,
This guy was tripping over himself, committing, near crimes and quid pro quos and whatever else you fucking want to say. So, I mean, they could probably take their pick of instances where they could, ask for records on this and records on that.
right.
So I think we're going to have more instances of foul play. And, like, I'd imagine plenty of people would be saying, oh, this is bigger than Watergate. But I think we live in such a world now that, like, the news cycle is so fast that something else is going to pop up tomorrow. And perhaps it might be bigger than Watergate, but it'll never get that same shine because the world is different now. TV is different now.
Right, right, right.
I think a big enamor and why so many people were glued to Watergate is because that was kind of the first instance of TV bringing you along for the ride with something like that.
Well, bro, there was like 12 channels then, first of all. And
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, this is
yeah,
different.
And second off, like, like TV turned off at like, what was it, like 8 or 9 o'clock. Like, yeah, there wasn't. We live in it, like you say, we live in a constant breaking news cycle. There's like mini Watergates like quarterly.
Yeah.
For the last decade.
Yeah.
Whether manufactured or real or not. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
yeah. So, no, I agree. I think that it'll be interesting coming out of, once we get through the Biden presidency a little further and start hearing a little more and more about just funny stuff Trump did. Because, like if it wasn't for like the seriousness of it all, like you said, those phone calls, those were hilarious. Like, I got some like sick, like sadistic, like joy out of just like laughing at just how funny he was. I mean, it was like a train wreck, but
yeah,
the
he's.
entertainment value was so good.
I mean, it is. It was if it wasn't so dangerous. But the actual entertainment value, you're right. It's like,
Right.
okay, let me.
And when I say dangerous, folks, I don't mean him. I'm talking about the monsters that were around him that were just doing
Enabled
whatever
it,
they
yeah.
wanted. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Like, think about it, like Trump just wanted to build a wall. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he was racist, all this other stuff, but like he didn't have any like he wasn't Doctor Evil. Like, he didn't have an evil genius plan. It was all these crazy assholes around him that were just doing whatever they wanted, and that's part of what this probably is. Some guy probably walked in a room and was like, "Oh, Mr. President, I actually have a way of, Bill Barr. Let's not forget again the fucking master chess player
Yeah.
in his ear for what was it, the last 2 years of his presidency, right? Because his first
Was
Attorney
Sessions.
General was Sessions.
Sessions, yeah.
Actually, so it was longer than that because he got rid of Sessions after like a year, didn't he?
Right. Sessions was the one who brought in the immigration stuff, the stricter shit at the border, and then
Yeah.
Barr was the last definitely 2.5 years.
Yo, and it's crazy too. Now that I'm looking back at it too, like remembering that because wow, I forgot so much stuff. Well, I didn't forget, but I like shelved it.
Yeah.
Sessions was like the only guy who supported Trump in the beginning, if you remember, like in Republican, hierarchy in Congress.
Well,
He
I
was
mean,
one. He was one of the early ride or dies, and Trump just spit him out.
yeah.
Spit him out. He was like, "Oh, you look funny, you Mr. Elfier. You're not."
Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions. His name makes
Beauregard.
what a middle name.
Oh man, that guy sucked.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, get him out of here. Get him out of here.
Uh,
What?
well, I was gonna say, like, to top that off, at the end of it, didn't Sessions and Trump have a falling out? Even
Well,
after all that, it
no,
ended kind
they
of
did,
bitterly.
but he went back to bootlicking Trump though. Like he was like begging for because remember he ran. He ran to get a seat to get back in the Senate,
Right.
and he lost. Trump didn't endorse him. Remember, Trump endorsed his opponent.
No, I'm Bill Barr.
No, I thought we were talking about Sessions still.
Did I say Sessions? I meant Barr.
Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah.
Yeah, Barr at the end they had a falling out too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, Barr knew that the ship had sunk. He wasn't gonna tie himself to Trump's ship. Yeah.
Yeah.
He did the proper exit strategy. Just another one of those. You know what's gonna be a great book one day is when someone like just writes like. I might write it, you know what I mean? Like I might
Do
write
it.
at some point when I'm older, like I'm gonna call it like Republican Hatchet Men, and just just chronologue all of these like Roger Stone, Bill Barr, what's the one guy's name? I'm blanking on his name. Oh, there's so many of them. Even Alex Jones. A lot of these guys that have actually had a lot of play behind the scenes in the Republican Party, like just doing that dirt, doing that dirt, but effectively.
Yeah.
You know what I
I
mean?
mean, what's his name? The bald guy with glasses, Karl Rove.
Yep, Rove.
Uh,
Right.
Obviously we have the villain. What's his name? The guy who got locked up and pardoned. Roger Stone. Yeah, you said him, did you?
Stone, and then Flynn. But Flynn's just a I thought you meant Flynn, but
And who's the British warmonger guy? What was his name again? He was a Nixon confidant, and he was Secretary of State too.
Oh, God, I'm blanking. Yeah,
Henry
there's so many.
Henry. Oh, was it Henry Kissinger?
Not. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Kissinger. I mean, some of his foreign policy.
Was he he was Nixon's secretary? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he
You're right.
was.
Yeah. Because we did the Operation Condor. Yep. That's right.
Yeah, Kissinger. There's a lot of blood on his hands too.
He was the one signing the checks for all those CIA assets and all those countries smoking communists. Yeah.
Yep. It's funny. I actually listened to the Economist podcast. They did an interview with Kissinger. I think he's like 90. He's in his 90s. He still sounded pretty sharp. He's obviously a sharp guy. You don't rise to that level of power and true power because he was manipulating quite a few people to do his bidding under his ideology.
Won the game.
Yeah.
Everything he wanted, he did.
He
won. You can't. Yeah, I would argue. Like I say, Mitch McConnell is probably the most effective politician of my generation.
Yeah.
You can't argue with that. He got everything he wanted done or didn't want done, got done.
Are they going to have a Confederate statue of Mitch McConnell and all this?
No, I'm just saying. Right.
They might, though, that's what I'm saying.
It's like respecting Darth Vader, you know what I mean? Like, you gotta give it up. Like, dude's just choke forcing people. Like, you gotta respect the efficacy and the power of these men that, even if you don't agree with them, because if you don't, you're always gonna just, like, I'll laugh at Trump, but that's because I don't consider him a mind that's a threat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's some of these guys behind the scenes are far more impressive in that they're able to have that sort of control. And it's a manipulation, and a lot of politics is that, as we know.
Right.
And it's not until like people get together and call it out that politicians properly start to take heed of what people want.
Right. And the left's most recent guy would probably be, I would argue, Rahm Emanuel.
Yep.
He's a Democrat, hatchet man. Very smart. Don't politics are horrible, but again, you got to respect the game.
Well, wasn't it? Isn't his brother? Doesn't he have a brother? Weren't they like a family of politicians as well? The
Yeah,
Manuels.
yeah, he had pedigree. The only thing is, like, when it came to electoralism, he was just dog shit. All of his strategies, like, he ran a bunch of candidates in like the 2010s, and they all got washed up. That people were like, oh, you got to go with them, you know. But as far as like political strategy goes, yeah, he was effective.
I think the new wave of political strategists now is going to have to be a different breed. I feel like because I think this new generation, we've talked about it before. This new generation of politically active, TikTokers. What are they?
Gen Z.
Gen
They're,
Z.
yep.
They are far more aware of the bullshit. I feel like, well, at least the typical bullshit of politicians. The medium in which they receive the bullshit from politicians is a little different. So it requires a little bit of subtlety, I guess, for that manipulation to take place.
Right. Well,
But
plus you got
they're not afraid to hold feet to the fire and get behind these movements, no matter how big or small. Which you could say get annoying at times, but it's certainly effective and makes people listen. And to that point, speaking of Gen Z, I saw that TikTok, Biden is reinstating, TikTok's, standing after Trump kind of, reined him in during his time. The
yeah, I
whole.
saw that. What did Trump actually do though? Like, I thought that he just talked about regulation. He actually did something. What was it that Biden rolled back?
Yeah, and I was wondering the same thing
Because like
because
we
obviously
still
we were
had,
still able to get on
yeah, like
TikTok.
everyone still had TikTok, right? Like, I don't understand what did he like limit the because I know that there's certain limitations that you can place on the level of data that apps that are from out country can you like bandwidth it sort of.
Yeah, so what it was, undone some of the former president's efforts to take down TikTok and WeChat.
Mm-hmm.
Biden has revoked executive Trump orders that would have banned TikTok and WeChat downloads, among other restrictions. Those
Right.
had already been blocked through injunctions. So it was the process was started by Trump, but much like anything, it gets wrapped up within lawsuits and injunctions. But they're now off the table with the sitting president's moves. This doesn't mean either app will avoid scrutiny, however. Biden has signed a new order requiring security reviews of TikTok, WeChat, and other apps developed or supplied by people living under the jurisdiction of foreign adversary, including China.
Hmm.
Which, I think it's fair enough. I think, data, as we know and as we've seen, with the numerous dragging of big tech to Congress, data has been a big thing for people to, use and manipulate to, spread whatever message or misinformation. So
I don't the idea of people like this whole like nanny state that we live in now where it's like, oh, we're gonna tax cigarettes and soda and all the, like, because it's bad, and then like people do the same thing with like he does that with TikTok, like, oh well, because China could steal information, and it's like, but the people want it, you know what I mean? Like it's just like the states that like don't have like helmet laws, and it's like, hey, you know what?
yeah,
Those fucking idiots want to get on a motorcycle without a helmet. Let them have at it. A little Darwinism live in real time. You know what
yeah.
I mean? I don't know. I reflexively, I don't really like stuff like that. Like, unless there's like some overt way that like, oh, China's directly hacking like the U.S. infrastructure through fucking TikTok.
Well, I
If
mean,
that's not the case. I just,
I would definitely
it
say
feels
they're
like a red
using
herring.
it.
It feels like it's just a way to like take a shot at China. You know what I mean?
I
It feels
thought
like,
that I thought that when Trump was coming out, I thought it was a way for them to flex a little bit.
mhm.
But I knew it was never going to stick, just because the movement was already started on there.
Right,
People
right.
were already in love with it.
Well, plus there's like legitimate GDP in this country from people who make money on TikTok. Like you're cutting your own throat a little there, too.
Yeah.
You got to think about it that way. Some of these, I've seen some of the numbers. Like people make a lot of money on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I was
crazy.
trying to make some money when Duncan went viral with that snow thing. I was like, "Yo,
Yeah, yeah,
should I start posting more videos on here?"
yeah. I remember I saw some breakdown of it. Like they were showing, like, oh, you have to have this many followers and views on YouTube or TikTok, like all the different socials, and like TikTok's like the hardest one. Like you have to reach like astronomical numbers to make like 100 grand or something like that.
Yeah.
The numbers are silly. Like it's not even real.
Well, did you watch? Did you watch that? Was it Black Mirror? Did you watch
Yeah,
any of that?
yeah, I love those. I love those. The third season was a little weird, but it
I
was still good.
Yeah, I didn't watch any of the third season. I watched it. I could only watch them in small doses, just because it was a little bit too close to the bone. Some of it, I'm like, I could see this shit happening, and guaranteed, I could see this shit happening, and it does. There's a lot of that stuff is like, there's some truth in a lot of that. Um,
Or you talking about like the social currency?
yeah, all of that. I mean, I know that
Well, we already do that.
we already do that. Yeah.
We already do that. Yeah. I mean, China does it literally.
Hey,
Like,
then-
you have to, like do community service if your score goes too low to like
Which,
ride the bus.
which, I saw the documentary that Vice News did on that, and I've seen other takes on it as well. Now, granted, I think we might have had a discussion on this as well, me and you, but it's kind of like just community service at times. It's kind of the same thing. I think the fact that it was China, people were like, "Oh, see."
Yeah. I mean, dude, Israel, you have to perform service. Like, you have to go in the military.
Yeah.
Or what is it, like after high school, right? Like, you
Yeah.
have to do like a year or two of
Conscription.
How's that any different? But no one criticizes that.
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a lot of Americans who actually say that we should do that here. Like they're like older right wingers, but
Yeah, I mean,
you should force all high school graduates to like do a year of military service or some sort of community service before they enter the private market. And it's like, okay, you first, asshole. You know what I mean? Like, what do
Yeah.
you think this is? Like, you're gonna
Yeah.
like just add on a requirement to like once you're out of 12th grade, you can't make nobody do anything. You know what I mean? Like, good luck with that.
Right.
Especially like all these, sovereign state, like, oh, freedom or whatever. And the thing is, I think that something like that it could possibly happen in America, because again, like, people will just be like, oh, well, it's not for me. Yeah, I don't give a shit, because they're adults.
Yeah.
We'll make the kids do it.
Well, just as we run down the line of kind of things that's coming out of the administration this week, I see Merrick Garland is pledging to beef up the DOJ's civil rights unit around and do more hiring of judges on the back of the kind of anti-voting rights or anti-voting laws that have been pushed out. So I think that's positive. They need to do that. They need to fucking set up as many things to look at that as they can. Because that's the real danger right there, is, everything that we talk about could happen in a positive push to the left, or at least more progressive values.
Mm-hmm.
If the Republicans continue to kind of tilt the scales with some of these restrictive laws, then when they do get in power, you can fucking make sure that they'll bolster up that shit and won't make the mistakes that the Dems are making right now by, going too slow.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. We're going to have to go into that at some point if there isn't really, too much movement on that. Because I know that we touched on it briefly, but I think that one episode that we did talk about it, I think many more states have written much more legislation.
Yeah.
I believe I didn't read the article. I saw a headline that West Virginia, apparently, like, one of their laws got like immediately struck down because it was just like overtly racist.
Yeah. Yeah. I did see that Texas, the governor there has vowed to continue to build the border wall after POTUS canceled it.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's funny because, Texas, I want to say in the last 4 or 5 months, he's really kind of turned it up a notch down there, hasn't he?
Yeah, they've been going fucking hard.
Yeah.
Wild. Pardon the pun.
They love that.
Wild down there, bro.
Yeah.
In Florida and Texas. Going.
Yeah.
Just
Was it
ape shit.
Was the Attorney General, his name is Patrick, I think, and then the governor is, what's his name? Greg Abbott. Yeah, Greg Abbott. Yeah, he's a fucking sneak.
Yeah, so anyone who's in Texas, just remember, this guy's talking about spending a ton of money. Now, and also, before I even get to the money, the people who live in those border towns in Texas do not want the wall.
No.
The people who actually live there overwhelmingly don't want the wall. So just remember, because you need to use eminent domain for a ton of that.
Right.
So, on its face, people don't like shit like that live in those towns. And not to mention, a ton of people in those border towns live with Mexican Americans,
Right.
and they those are their neighbors. They like Mexicans. They view this as a racist thing to to just like build a wall and fucking, like they don't like it and just conceptually. But remember, we did that episode where we talked about
Yeah.
the power issues down there. And this
Yep.
guy's gonna spend mad money on building some stupid ass wall.
Yep.
But
And
I guarantee you, there's still people who haven't gotten any money uh, with all the issues that came out of those power outages and the damage to people's homes. Like
no,
I
that'll
guarantee
be slow moving. But this is a thing. It's a way of rousing up the element that they're looking for. It's always the same when those are the issues that get those people going and get people out to vote, and
right. And also, don't forget, Texans. The next time there is another disaster, and your governor and senators have to beg the Fed for money. Remember, he's going to spend millions of dollars on this stupid fucking wall.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars that Democrats were actually willing to give Trump at a couple points. Did give him some, but we're willing to give him more in compromise towards the end of his presidency. Let's not forget.
Yeah.
So yeah, just remember that.
I mean, like I said, I think there's going to be battles from fucking Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, with different instances of shit like this, from the voting rights to more, anti-immigration stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just, they're throwing enough shit stuff at the wall and seeing what'll stick. Where the Dems, not just the Dems, I think there's plenty of, Republicans and Libertarians who, see what's happening with some of these restrictive laws is wrong. I think it's unfair to say it's just Dems versus Republicans with this, because like I said to you before, I feel like it might sound cliche, but there's more that fucking we have in common with one another that doesn't. And I think it's the sleight of hand by powers that be and people in position of power that really divide us more so.
Right.
And that's a little simplistic, but it's what I believe, and that's why a lot of this is frustrating to me, because you're being led to believe one thing, when you grow up in certain places, because it's been drilled into you. And Texas is one of those places. Like I said, after living in Austin, which was a little, it was still Texas, but it's definitely the different Texas than what I thought it would be. You certainly have your yeehaw and your people who love their guns, and that's fair enough. But it's obviously more of a liberal and progressive place than, let's say, Midland and Odessa area, or Dallas, parts of even some of the big cities in Texas have, and it's seen in what you saw, where it was basically Texas is a purple state now. And I think that's why Abbott is putting his foot on the gas.
Yeah. As soon as a state goes like 55-45, purple.
Yeah, I mean, look at Georgia. They were the first ones to fucking start putting in some of these restrictive laws. Mm-hmm. And it bodes well for Trump Republicans, because this is further kind of solidifying his theories and his ideology.
Right. And the thing is, like, I was reading about the other day, like, the biggest threat for some of these Republican state houses that are pushing this stuff through, obviously, like Texas, Florida, like we said, going absolutely ham. They have, like, complete lockdown control of their state houses.
Yep.
The real threats are actually the Wisconsin State House,
yep.
which is typically blue. They put in a bunch of voting restrictive legislation. That's a threat to the Democratic Party. What is it? What's the other state? I'm blanking on it. It's not Minnesota. It's somewhere. It's another Midwestern state. But there's a couple of states that are typically, like 80-90% of the time go Democrat, unless some, phenomenal Republican comes through.
Mm-hmm.
That the legislation went through. And I think it might have been Maryland. I can't remember, which is purple as well.
Yeah.
But the whole point is here, folks. Like, this is we referred to it a couple times before on the podcast, but just like, the setup that we're seeing right now, the way the Democrats are positioning themselves for these midterms right now, not looking great.
No.
Not looking great. Everything's, like I said on the last episode or the one before last, Democrats are typically just reactive to Republicans. They're not being progressive. They're not pushing any of the issues.
Yep.
They're just kind of saying things and watching to see how Republicans react and then playing off of that. And when you have a slim majority like they do right now, and the odds on controlling and retaining
BBC
power in
Sounds.
Congress
Music.
weren't good before you started legislating poorly
Yeah.
coming out of the gate after coronavirus aid, it doesn't look great. Um, but I here's the one thing that I will keep hope in is the fact that we can't let up on the fact that, or we can't forget about the fact that, again, like we've mentioned a bunch of times before, like a lot of these national level Republicans don't really have anything to run on. So like that is the good thing that's going on here, because like other than inflation, which I think is going to be the main stick that the Republicans beat the Democrats up with, especially towards the end of the year here. We talked about it before. When we start coming up on the budget, we're definitely having a government shutdown this year again,
Right.
without a doubt. That's we're coming up on like what, number 6 in a row. Yeah, that's the only thing that really concerns me, is if that gets dragged out and we start pushing into the next year with that. That's what I'm really worried about. But I would keep my eye on Wisconsin, because that's huge. I do not foresee, because the thing is, right, like, look, we got midterms coming up. Coming off of, Georgia going blue, Texas coming near purple, I do not foresee those trends holding,
Yeah.
because we've said it before. Trump was good and bad. He brought a lot of people to the table that were involved with politics. Everybody's going night night again.
Right.
So that favors Republicans. And there isn't any, the contradictions aren't really heightened, because as much as what we've said a million times before, like, Republicans came strong out of the gate talking about Dr. Seuss and all this other nonsense, they've largely stayed quiet too. I think they understand that, yeah, we don't really have anything to offer. There is no national plan, so we're not going to talk about anything. We're just going to keep giving deference to Trump and, block whatever Biden wants to do. So as long as, if we continue in this stalemate pattern,
Well,
yeah, it doesn't look great for me.
yeah, I'd agree. Now, I did want to ask you this because, like I said, prior to us hopping on, it's been talked about more and more. I saw now that Florida banned public schools teaching critical race theory, which examines the long-term impacts of white supremacy and slavery, including institutional racism today. DeSantis claimed that without evidence, it teaches children to hate our country and to hate each other. So you said you kind of know, you've read up on some of this.
Yeah.
Explain to some people who might not know, what is critical race theory. I kind of teased it there, or I was talking about white supremacy and slavery's impact. But why is this popping up now as something that is a divisive issue?
So critical race theory is something that, it's sort of, it lagged a little bit. This was something that, as we mentioned before, we touched on it a little bit pre-production. It's percolated a lot in left circles. So just to give a breakdown of it, it's basically, it's an extremely academic, like high level intelligentsia thought around, like you said, civil rights history, examining how, the effects of, Jim Crow, all kinds of like legal race harm
Right.
through in America, and trying to observe the echoes in the pond, so to speak, of how that progressed through American history, how it trickled down through, it rippled out to other states, took foothold in federal policy, things like that.
Well, I think a lot of what we're seeing now, and I guess the reemergence of the discussion on it, is off the back of the New York Times 1619 project.
Right.
That kind of recentered the focus on, the history of, I believe that was when the first enslaved African arrived. And it uses then race as a kind of way to describe those events. And, the 1619 project specifically includes a curriculum that can be used in schools.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now,
So I haven't seen the curriculum,
yeah, me
but
either.
I've heard people talk about this a lot. Like I said, I listen to a lot of debates of different personality, and people, academics, scholars, YouTube personalities. People just comes up a lot.
Yeah,
Um, and like I said, it percolated a lot in left circles, and it's just now like Republicans kind of were late to the game and started grabbing hold of it. I believe Trump started mentioning it a bit, but that again, that's because it got asserted to the front of national spotlight because
right.
of New York Times and all of that. But the Republicans obviously don't understand critical race theory. Like they don't understand what the actual purpose is. They see it as just a propaganda
Yeah,
tool.
they hear the word
Um,
theory.
Right, but it's not. It's actually, like I said, it's not really. It's a very, if you know your American history, like the true history of America, not the bullshit you just read in school, um, it's super obvious and intuitive. Like, yeah,
Right.
it's really easy to see how, the legal system was leveraged to wield racism in this country for a long time. During slavery, after slavery,
Yeah.
it's not. It really isn't that complicated. Critical race theory can get complicated when they start creating the links between how the law led to psychological, like
Mm-hmm.
it seeped out into the psychological and then spread all throughout America. That's a big part of what some people take issue with the theory, which is because when you start talking about scholars and
Right.
intellectuals, anytime that people try to take a theory that has concrete basis and like something like law and historical evidence that you can point to, and then you try to translate it to sociological or psychological effect, of course you're going to have people argue over whether the validity of that.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's super obvious. It's a hard thing. It's not really a provable thing. It's like trying to,
Right. But I mean,
it.
you could say, I mean, obviously, Juneteenth is coming up. We just, you know, recognized, the anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. These are things that haven't, really been thought about.
Right.
So it's a leap. Some Republicans are claiming that this theory is the reasons why there's this and this, but I mean, is it? I certainly think that the discussion when you talk about a curriculum is one that's important, but at the same time, I don't think you need to like outlaw, like ban critical race theory. And you know, uh, Florida, clearly DeSantis is trying to protect, uh, you know, the supremacy of white people down there with this, and I think again this is another one of those issues that it's it's very very divisive. It's like your Confederate statues. You think of the backdrop of all that, right? Charlottesville,
Yeah.
that all started around the Confederate statue movement, right? The reason that they were rallying in Charlottesville was to protect the Confederate statue.
Yep.
So these things are definitely, they're culture war shit,
Hmm.
but the implications of them are massive. And this is another one of these things where, you clearly split into two camps right away. Um, and
Right.
the two camps are 1619 Project is bullshit, critical race theory is bullshit, and then the other people then who believe that elements of it are correct and should be discussed and talked about in school. Isn't that not what
Right.
we should do? Like,
So here's my thing, right? So inherently, when you talk about like critical race theory, it's pretty old. Like it's just like people are just talking about it more and more now. And I
yeah,
would argue that I would argue less than 10% of Americans even know what it actually is. First of all, so let's keep that in context. We're
yeah,
talking about a very small slice of people who even have any idea of what it actually is, whether you're talking about the actual curriculum that the 1619 project or just the theory itself.
right,
So when you talk about this with education, um, I actually, surprise, surprise, people won't be that taken aback by my take on it. Is I don't think so. First of all, there's different applications, right? When we talk about education, obviously the South lags and has huge issue with like
mm-hmm.
we've all seen it, the way the publishers that they use for different historical books that they put in their schools. There's huge fucking problems and gaps in the truth about what happened in America, or just entire sections of American history they don't even talk about. So again, like you have to consider these things, right? When what I'm about to say might shock some people. I mean, I don't think it's shocking at all, but like, so critical race theory has a whole section and component around white privilege.
Uh-huh.
Now, that alone is enough of a controversial topic before you even expand into observing again, the history of how legal levers were wielded against people of color in America throughout its history. Um, I personally am of the opinion that no, you don't need to be talking to 5-year-olds about white privilege. You don't. That's something that if you want to do that in your household, that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. But I feel personally that there's more and again, what is my guys, you know me, what is my goal here? My goal here is always with my political analysis, with my political strategy, what is the best path to winning? What is the best path to not having these monsters in power anymore?
Yeah.
Okay? And whoever that may be. It might be some monsters in the Democratic Party, might be some monsters in the Republican
Yeah.
Party. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But what is the path that's going to put us on the path, what's the choice that's going to put us on the path to victory?
Mm-hmm.
I think the backlash, first of all, it's something that me and you talked about. Me and Patter went down to an antique store down in Hudson. We took a ride the other day. We had a long conversation where we were talking about the the extreme pace of cultural change in America in the last 10 years. And again, it's all coming from a good place because America is being forced to reckon with
Mm-hmm.
its inequities. It's being forced to reckon with the historical nature of the damage it's done to, not even just groups of people by race, but class,
Yep.
all of these things. We've had the internet for a long time now. People know how to use it. Everything is out there. You know what I mean? If you want to find the answers, you can go find them.
Yep.
And obviously you don't want that to take the place of a school system. But what my point is, I don't think that there will be an overall general benefit if you start putting in a program in every elementary school, which some of these people are talking about. Let's keep it real. That's not just a Republican talking point. There are people who want this stuff to be put in historical curriculums in elementary schools. I don't think that there is much use in the strife that will come from that than there is functionality in teaching a 7-year old about white privilege in school. I don't think that. And the reason I say this is this: there's a lot of teachers who will not subscribe to this. You're going to get it taught poorly or wrongly, or it's going to be there's so many issues and ways that this system can break down and go wrong and cause
Right.
more harm than good that I don't think it's the best place. Now, if you start talking about like high school or whatever, sure. I would even maybe middle school. Again, it depends.
Right.
It depends on where you're talking about. But there are people, academics who extremely radical academics who think that no, you should teach this from a very early age because there's a lot of people who don't live. For example, I'm here in Schenectady. I grew up in Schenectady. Patter lives here. This is a very culturally diverse place, the capital region, for the most part. Unless you live in some of these pockets that are extremely white or extremely black, for the most part, people get a lot of
Multicultural.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of multiculturalism. You get a lot of exposure to a lot of different people. I grew up. I had sleepovers at black friends' houses, white friends' houses. You know what I mean? Like I got to experience and see how people live their lives differently. Talk to people about our differences. A lot of this stuff was intuitive for me. You know what I mean? I didn't know the words white privilege had never. I mean, I don't know if they'd even been invented when I was in elementary school, but people understood and felt these things in different ways. You could see it. I
Right.
think that there's some utility to letting children who have the opportunity to understand and learn the world on their own terms, because here's the problem with it. My issue with trying to put a lot of these curriculums that, regardless of what the merits may be, because this is all this is true. I'm not questioning the material. This is all true. They're not teaching anything wrong or incorrect.
Well, they're
Because
calling it like Marxism or neo-Marxism, and the
which is
new
ridiculous
yeah
because there's absolutely nothing about class or economics in it.
yeah
So I don't even get that. That doesn't make any sense. The cultural Marxism doesn't exist, folks. First of all, that's a fake term. It's not a fucking thing. That's just
Red
the little
Scare.
coin. It's the little coin term that the right tried to create to explain their extreme L's they're taking in the cultural movement, in the cultural direction America's shifting in. They're losing. They know it. They
Yeah.
have to come up with some crazy fake thing that they can connect to communism. This cultural shift America's having and feeling right now is this is just we're coming to a close in a chapter. Trump was the end. He was the last chapter in the the I don't want to say like the typical like the angry white man not having control, but no, like
Yeah.
people who had people who knew this country for what it was for a long time and didn't have to grapple with these things. They didn't have to listen to people like Jamaica Miles representing them in their
Right.
city,
Yeah.
on their school board talking about these issues. They didn't have to. It wasn't on TV. No one on their TV screen talked about it. No one they knew.
Yeah.
No one that represented them. No one had any power that said anything like this. Those people were all subjected to one little corner somewhere that, maybe was 50 miles away from them.
Yeah.
Now it's everywhere. So what we're witnessing is the struggle of people who do not want this country to change or to reckon with a lot of these things that we talked about in the beginning of the episode. Racism,
Yeah.
colonialism, all these other issues. It's going to happen whether they want it to or not. My thing is, I don't know what the utility is to try to burst this across the finish line and put something like that in schools, like, say, next year, and the actual strife this will cause.
Well,
I don't know if that's worth it. I just don't know if it's worth it because it's going to happen anyway.
Well-
That's my point. People like me and Patter, we're not that popular yet. There's people thousands of times more popular than us that are saying the exact same shit that we talk about. It's on CNN, it's on MSNBC, it's out there.
yeah.
I don't know. I think that we need to focus on getting rid of this adults need to be assimilated to this first. If we have a huge chunk of this country that doesn't even know, again, I would argue 10% of the country knows what critical race theory is.
Well,
If adults don't even know about it, I think it's going to cause a ton of issues. We're already at an extremely volatile place in our culture. I don't know if putting more pressure on the accelerator is the best idea. I'm just looking at it in that pure logical way.
I say fuck that, because this really ties back around to the start of the conversation that we had. It's America failing to take stock of what actually happened in this country. I mean, it's only within the last 10 years you've seen a movement loud enough against Columbus Day, you know what I mean, and the atrocities that he took place, or he was the leader of. So something like this, I heard people critiquing that in and itself, because it's looking at from a racial standpoint, it is inherently racist, has been one of the critiques of it, which is bullshit. I think in American schools, you stand up, you do the Pledge of Allegiance. It's very patriotic. After every morning in class.
We don't do that no more.
You don't do it anymore?
Not in New York, I don't think.
No.
You don't have to. I think you can. You used to have to.
Right. Well, my point was that, you're already, there's a level of indoctrination that happens in schools in general. And we already know that there's major failings in schools, not at the fault of the teachers, more so in fault sometimes of the administration and kind of what is being taught. I mean, I had a good, window into it because I got to experience kind of how things were displayed, are taught, and how you learn the world, coming from Ireland, and kind of how you learn about your own history, but then the history of the world. What I thought was very interesting when I moved here is, first of all, everything was America-centric. Everything you learned. Like, yeah, we learned about Irish history, but we delved deep into, the histories of the world. And, we were critical, of all things that each side did, and as well as our own flaws. And the glaring thing when I moved here was listening. I remember specifically in college, I had a law class with this old guy. He was like 70s. I can't even remember his name. But we got into a heated debate. I think we both ended up shouting at each other at the end, because he was talking about, America's role in the world, and, how they've... And then it got to the point where we were talking about the Japanese internment camps. Mm-hmm. And, nobody really had challenged him on, whether it was right or wrong. So I was obviously stood up and talked to him. And I got under his skin so much. And this is a 77-year-old lawyer who's teaching, college classes. And I remember him just getting so heated with the fact that I was even challenging that. And here's a person who, he's tasked with shaping minds and teaching curriculum and college courses. And, getting moved to the point where he's angry at me because I'm saying, well, what happened to, Japanese Americans during, uh, you know, World War II is wrong. That shit is, if it had happened in another country, America would have been invading it. You know what I mean?
Yep. Forced to sell their property at pennies on the dollar. Yep.
Yeah, and even how they talked about it when they were released. They were like, oh, they get a stipend now because we kept them in the thing. I was watching John Oliver the other day, and he showed kind of the old the pre-roll clips they'd shown. Like, oh, let's go back to the news here. We have the Japanese Americans getting released from these
Mm-hmm.
extended stay camps. They were
Yeah,
they did,
summer camps.
yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean
No,
that
and
again.
and
That's another
the thing is too,
instance.
like history is, it's one of those things. Like, it's fun. It made me think. History is one of those things that it gets romanticized. Like you're saying, like that guy was like a 77 law professor, a 77-year-old law professor, and I feel like people that like really like get into history and stuff, especially around wars, people kind of get lost in like the realpolitik of it and forget that, like, no, those are actual people, just like what we were saying in the beginning.
Yeah.
Where people, because I've heard people launch defenses of Japanese internment too, and they'll be like, oh, countries all over the world were doing that to nationals from other countries they were at war with at the time. Japan, didn't declare war and attack the country, all this stuff, all these justifications.
Right.
But and again, it's because it seems like lifetimes ago. You know what I mean? And so it makes it easier for people to talk about. And not to mention, it's because, Japanese Americans don't really have any voice in America. And, well, I mean, they do somewhat, but they don't really complain about it. It's not something that, Japanese Americans harp on, or, you know, take issue with or demand reparation for. You know what I mean? So there's no swell to push. So for the people that have his viewpoint, they think like, oh, what's the problem? No one cares about this anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, it wasn't a. Why do you care? Why are you like being a white? Why are you white knighting this?
Right.
But no, I just want to finish my last thought that I had on critical race theory, and again, I want to keep it on this sticking point of the concept around white privilege and why I don't know if that's useful for young children. Here's my thing. If we all can't be honest, like, so first of all, me and you understand the value in these things because, again, it's the truth, and we should teach history with truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about like what I think is true, like what actually happened. Okay, objective truth, right? There's extreme utility in that. That should always be the goal, and you can do that without a lot of the sociology attached to these things. And that's what my problem is because if we all understand and know right now, we've spent a bunch of time on this podcast. We all do it when we're in person and talking to each other, and we talk about how difficult it is and how weird it is to have discourse around these topics with other grown-ups.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is that we want to put that on small kids, the people who want to teach this in K through 5, or not. I'm not K through 5, but like 3 through 5. There's a lot of people recommending that you start teaching concepts like white privilege in like third grade.
Yeah.
So we already know that we have an anxiety around this in our adult discourse. We already know the issues that it presents, the strife, the confusion, in my opinion, the biggest point for me is the complete lack of class analysis that goes along with concepts like white privilege that cause confusion.
Right.
Because when white privilege first broke on the scene and started being swirled around in the zeitgeist in political discourse, the biggest sticking point I saw with a lot of, or biggest wall I saw with a lot of libertarian friends that I had, people who just weren't even that involved in politics, but like, poor white people I grew up with, which again were like, well, I mean, I don't have any privilege because, again, they don't understand the theory. They're not reading these things like
Right.
me and you.
Yeah.
But on its face, it seems like an attack.
Right.
Okay? Now, I'm not here to defend that, whatever. I'm telling the fact. It's the truth. This is the way that a lot of people who aren't neck deep in politics consume these things. These are the issues that are going to be at hand, and these things like that book that woman wrote,
White might.
uh, white fragility.
Yeah, white fragility.
Like this literature and they don't have any way to confront that because they have no class analysis.
Right.
That's my point. It's an incomplete theory, in my opinion, because if you only discuss the way that law was wielded and you don't also observe the way that over the course of the decades, and as we got, we turned into the 20th century, and things steadily started getting worse for working people in this country. And then there was a little burst up pre-World War II, and then it all went fucking downhill, after the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't include those types of analysis, you don't speak to what people's actual circumstances are that aren't affected by racism. So when you leave that incomplete gap and you don't talk about how a lot of that class division fueled a lot of these issues that came from a lot of these race issues,
Yeah.
that's a huge problem, and it's an incomplete curriculum in my
Well,
opinion. That's
I think
my pushback.
right.
That's my pushback, because you don't couch, if you're going to talk about, oh, the whole point of all this is we're going to explore the grievances and find the truths of people that were harmed by all of these systematic oppressions in this country,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to focus on racial oppression. You, at your own peril, exclude class oppression. You, at your own peril, do that, because all these people who formed rainbow coalitions in the 60s understood this. It is necessary. It is the antidote to
Right.
it's closing the gap
Martin Luther
that
King knew it.
it's
Yeah.
closing the hole that racists will put they will put a crowbar in and separate you from the people who would typically understand and agree with you.
Right.
So when you miss that piece of it, I have issue with it. Like it's just incomplete. That's my main critique of it. It's all true. The curriculums are true. I've read through them, a bunch of them. I did not read the White Fragility book. I've read like the cliff notes and heard people's commentary and breakdowns of the books.
Mm-hmm.
There's some issues and points that I take with that and racial sensitivity training and its format and the way that it's given, not the actual content of it. But again, it all comes
Well,
back to the same concept of these. Let's keep this in context, folks. A lot of these people are neoliberals writing these things,
mm-hmm.
so that's like I'm always gonna have
To make
issues with that.
themselves feel better.
Exactly.
And
Because
I think
because
there's an order of sorry, not to cut you off. I think there's an order of operations that people think needs to be had with this. What needs to be talked about first is classism. Trump. Uh, the racism portion of it, because inherently, it happened obviously when the Irish came here. They were seen as the lowest the lowest class, and then black people were brought here, and then there was that fight for the bottom rung of the ladder for a long time. It was easy for America then to turn its negativity towards blacks and slavery and Jim Crow, because they had someone who was different at how they looked. Whereas the class warfare was already taking place before slaves were brought in and taken. So that's an interesting point. Is that like
well,
you know
slavery heightened the class warfare because it literally took work from people.
yeah, it did, but it there was that tipping point then where you know the Irish and the Italians went from being on that bottom rung to then being in the police and
Yeah,
Tammany
just being
Hall.
white
Yeah,
people. Yeah,
exactly. There was a coalition of whiteness that happened that was inherently bad for people of color, and continues, in my opinion, to resonate within that the privilege of whiteness and the superiority that there is baked into
right.
the American experience. So that is an interesting point. Like what is prioritized amongst that discussion? Is it around classism? Is it around racism? And I think that they're
Both,
one and
because
one. Yeah.
you can't do one without the other. That's all I'm saying. You know what I mean? This isn't for me. Like when I make those criticisms, when I'm like what we talked about before, I'm like I think that we're focused too much on racial justice at the expense of talking about economic justice, where there needs to be a healthier balance. I don't care about what the balance is with this around critical race theory and all that. Like it just needs they need to be paired. That's all.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think
And
as a movement.
it's incomplete otherwise.
Yeah.
Just like there's communists in this country. There's communists who do not talk about race, and they're wrong. You can't do that.
Right.
You're never gonna have your tent's never gonna get your tent's not big enough.
Right.
You won't win or garner enough support. And again, if you do just pure class analysis in this country without race, you're not doing class analysis then,
Mm-hmm.
because they go in tandem. They're one. They're melded. You can't do one without the other. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I think a lot of that is when you talk about a lot of these, sociological theories that have kind of been being grafted onto, history and, I respect a lot of these projects because a lot of this stuff is brave. A lot of these folks that go out there and discuss these things, I give them a ton of credit, like, because there's a lot of people who do not like this shit. You know what I mean?
No.
Like,
Yeah.
you're doing something bold, and I have respect for it. Um, and like even though it's not necessarily like you said, it's not first in my order of operations. It's certainly laudable and needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think I worry because, like, when we talk about these specific illnesses within the American body politic, it's kind of hard, like, when you do these overall um viewpoints and theories around things that are just like, oh, here's when the country was founded, and then it's like you do it like step by step by step by step. It's really hard for me to, you know, I never really hear anyone analyze like the actual cultural decay of America, which I feel like it's like a huge missing piece. And when I say that, I mean, like, I refer to it all the time, like just the just rapacious consumerism, and like there's a lot of other cultural I don't want to call it unique, but their cultural strengths as from a nation state perspective that America has that a lot of its European counterparts don't have,
Yeah, the
that
sheer
that that
diversity, and it's a
that
patchwork
are
quilt.
instilled, that well yeah that are instilled, like, that are instilled in its people that aren't necessarily prioritized in other countries. When I say that, I mean, like, you know it's very much ingrained in American culture, in our media, um, where it's like, everybody, oh, I want to make it to the top. Like, you know what I mean? It's very Rome-esque in that regard, where you have this hyper ambition, but it's all focused around wealth.
Yeah.
It's not prestige or respect the way that, ancient
All my dudes out
civilizations
here.
used to be focused around. Money was just a means to an end back then. Now money is the end. And I think that there's a ton of analysis that some people do, but again, all of these things all need to be worked in together and discussed. And it bothers me that I see everything kind of get like, and I try to do it, but I'm not a historian. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of trying to, like, I feel these things, and I take little pieces from all these other intellectuals that I think have good theories, and I try to, like, put them up in this ball and like make the Play-Doh one color. But I'm not that good at it. But it's like, that's another huge component of it that we don't talk about. And then, like, the fourth color of Plato, like all the militarism and the colonialism, like these things don't that doesn't really come up in critical race theory too often. You know what I mean? Because they're observing domestic things.
Right. Well,
So this is I just it's like, if you're gonna go fully radical in education, do it the whole way. Do it the whole way. Don't just do it in one area that's gonna trigger and piss off and maybe launch a fucking civil war.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
I think what's interesting, and we've kind of come full circle on how we started the conversation and what we're talking about now. But you think of the heyday of the American family, let's say, at least from a historical standpoint. You're probably talking about where the middle class was really strong. What was that, like the 50s? Was it coming out of World War II? Everybody had,
Yeah.
the father went to work and the mother stayed at home. They had a house, they had a car, they had everything they needed.
Mm-hmm.
The missing component to really during America's heyday was the black people were dealing with redlining all the way up to the 70s and 80s and weren't able to get that upward mobility. To the point now where critical race theory has been around for a decade plus. It's kind of birthed in intelligentsia and academia, and it's talked about in Harvard, and you have plenty of people who are putting thought towards these larger ideas on how America was shaped in a racial backdrop. And I think I think it's important that it's been talked about, and I think it's important that it's being brought to schools as discussion points. Like, to your point, I definitely think there's a time to talk about race within, I guess, a curriculum, and when you're dealing with kids, because I don't care what you say, kids see kids until they're told that person is black or that person is Asian. You know what I mean? And I think, again,
And there's something pure about that. I just want it to be left pure for a little while. You know what I mean? I don't.
yeah, I don't think you need to learn it
Something
too
about that
early.
bothers me, man. That's my point. Like whether it's ideological or not, whether it's true or not, it's like, please don't put this fucking mind poison on children.
Right, and
Like
because you know what's going to happen.
it's driving us all mad right now.
You know what's going to happen
Like,
is we're going to see snippets on Twitter of, you know, some little kid. You know, there's going to be like, you know, little videos of this, that, and the other where they're trying to like ostracize a young child for not knowing this or not knowing that. It'll grow to that because it'll become that vitriolic talking points either side. I mean, there's no real sides to this. It's like if you're someone who really thinks critically of how America has been shaped to this point, to say that, you know, white privilege and the superiority of the white man in America is not something that happened on the backs of black people and continues to be baked into systems now. I mean, we're still seeing it with stuff with George Floyd and the like, you know, so it's not a fucking leap. So,
you know, and then observing that transition again, once, you know, the shackles came off, the civil rights movement, all that, and how the only way that American middle class, that heralded American middle class, was able to keep sustaining itself was you had to find other places to exploit around the world.
yeah.
And how that inevitably led to the destruction of the middle class.
Right, and that's on the back of Reagan and, you know, gutting the middle class, gutting social schemes. That helps the people.
I feel like that's such an important component that these two worlds have to connect and talk and meet, because you can't. How do you make that transition? How do you make that transition? Right?
What?
Once you pass the civil rights movement and you're talking about critical race theory, and because again, it's focused around law, right?
Yeah.
So once the laws like sort of start getting near correct, and people just start fucking around and playing around the edges, and then it just starts becoming like a wink wink kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like what we were talking about, right? It's just there's so many things that need to be rectified. You know, we were talking about the NFL and how they had a lower, you know, you know the specific of what it was, but wasn't it around the test score, the cognitive test scores of black athletes versus white athletes was a lower bar, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's harder for them to prove cognitive damage for concussion suits.
Yeah, and this is still, they're only overturning it now.
Right.
So that's in one facet of life and sport and entertainment and, you know, all of that. And that's the NFL. I'd imagine if you thumbed through every, you know, law in every state, you'll find tons of laws that disproportionately affect black people that have been there for, you know, years and years and years and years. You know, it's no coincidence that, you know, Florida are banning critical race theory from schools. What other states are doing it? Mississippi, Alabama. You know, you don't need to be fucking Inspector Clouseau or Morse, you know, but like, oh, I wonder why they don't want that to be taught, you know. It's like, because they think the fucking South is going to rise again. That's why.
My thing is, though, here's my take, though. It's like, all right, so they say these people ban stuff. They ban it in schools. Okay, what are kids spending their time consuming? They're on YouTube. They're on Roblox. They're on TikTok. The left has all of these things on fucking locks, man. This stuff will pervade. These kids are gonna get
right.
It. Regardless of what any legislation happens, regardless of what schools do adopt this theory program, any of this stuff, the whole point is we're on trajectory. Like, this is all of this exposure.
But is that not the argument that happens around white supremacy? Is that like, yeah, sure, a black man or woman can rise to the, you know, top appointment in America, but if they have different starting points, then that's where the inequity lies. So
you're saying inequity in education by the fact that some kids will get it and some won't?
Well, I'm just talking about in general. Like, clearly systems are broken, and systems are inherently broken because of, you know, racism and it being from the judicial to, you know, all the way through society. And like I said before, when the Civil Rights Act was signed, that didn't automatically turn everybody who was a racist piece of shit before that all of a sudden embracing their black neighbors. No.
For sure.
So there's obviously going to be some runoff of that, and it's not going to be an overnight thing. And we're still seeing it, in the 2010s and 2020s now, 2021.
Right.
So, what are the things that we can do to educate people on what the realities of it are? Does it mean taking some gleam off America's, shine within its own view? So what? you know, kids are kids. Like I said, focus on kids having fun and learning. By the time they're talking about history, they'll be old enough to comprehend it. And the reality is, whatever they learn in school, a mother and father and a guardian has a lot of sway on what they're thinking. But
Right.
I think it's like anything. You just because you can't get everybody to do the right thing shouldn't stop you from trying to get more people on the right side of history. So if they can integrate it into the schools in such a way that it's not going to it's more so a discussion, and it's more so let's look at this, as opposed to,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is what would have happened if this didn't happen. And history
Right.
is written by the victor, right? Isn't that what they say? And I think in America, like I said, I very much saw that it would, if you were to believe some of the history that I learned, America single-handedly took down the Nazis, when the reality was it was the Russians in the Russian winter that really, stuck the fork in them.
Yes, sir. Overreach.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like I said, man, hey, I agree with everything you're saying. I just, again, I get concerned because I feel like we were we go down these paths, right? And then we never stop and analyze what is actually like what the state of the social fabric
Right.
is. You know what I'm saying? That's I'm just
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned that there is only so much velocity you can reach before things start ripping apart. And
I think they're
again,
already there.
it might happen anyway,
Yeah.
right? It might happen
Yeah.
anyway. So, whatever. But all I'm saying is these people who completely oppose this shit think that we're literally like gonna indoctrinate their children to like hate them or like turn them into like liberal bots.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't do it to forgo that. Again, my main
Buyer beware.
reason of don't do it that young is like, hey, let kids be
Yeah,
kids
no, I'm with you
before
on that. I'm with you on
you
that.
know what I mean. I don't. Some of the ages I've seen people say the curriculum should be introduced is a little young. Um,
But I mean, kids are
I
learning
think
it
that I think
anyway.
for
They're
sure,
learning it anyway, one way or the other.
for sure. I just again, and then my second again, like I said before, the probably the biggest issue I have, other than like like kids be kids, is like I don't trust a lot of these folks who would administer this stuff
Right.
because a lot of them don't want to reckon with the other things we discussed that should be.
Yeah.
And this left standing alone is incomplete. You know, I don't people said a lot of the same things with a lot of other education programs that have happened in this country and didn't want to analyze what the possible pitfalls were. Like No Child Left Behind. And granted, that's completely
Yeah.
different, right? That was an overhauled program where you wanted to punish schools that didn't test well or do whatever. But it sort of rings with, again, like this blanket, like, oh, we're going to do a federal policy.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like people just don't want to, they feel the righteousness of the deed needing to be done and have this, this super optimistic idea of what the outcome is going to be. And no one ever thinks, like, well, what could go wrong?
Well,
You
I
know?
think it's very telling that you turn on. I guarantee you turn on Fox tonight. You're watching Hannity or Tucker, and they'll be talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that should tell you all that you need to know. The things that they talk about and they want to ring true with their viewers are the things that kind of concern them. They're getting out of their control, right? It's kind of their alarm bell.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I think
And also, let's keep this in perspective. Like, if like if this became like a national program, it's only being allowed because it doesn't threaten power
Yeah,
bases.
and
Like let's
you
keep it real. Just like I was saying before, like no one there wouldn't be some New York Times like fucking like 1897 project like featuring Karl Marx where they're like, "Oh, this is class analysis and the dictatorship of the proletariat." That would never be
yeah,
allowed. Like that's all
I
I'm saying.
guarantee.
And
Uh,
the thing is, all that analysis is true too.
yeah,
Maybe not all the prescriptions everyone agrees with, but the analysis of the of the illness is
yeah,
correct. Can't really argue with it. We've watched it play out
and
for
you'll
the
see
last
it
decade.
juxtapose. You'll see it juxtapose the critical race theory alongside what Ilhan Omar just said. You'll see it framed that way now as talking points for a couple weeks, and it'll continue to be framed that way for obvious reasons. They need to scare. But yeah, it's certainly interesting, and as someone who is kind of observing this, and my like I said to you before, my thought of what America was before I came was a lot different to what it is when I came, and that's neither good nor bad. Is what I'm saying with that is that it was like, oh, they do a good job at their, I guess, their entertainment and how wonderful they're good at packaging things and making it look glitzy. And but when you come here, you know that there's some definitely skeletons, and also like the reckoning with race never really properly took place, and that's why you're seeing these things to continue to be brought to the forefront, whether it be police brutality or issues within state and federal laws, whatever.
Right.
Nothing was truly rectified fully, and they should continue to talk about things if it's not right and just right, and whether that pisses off people who think they want to bring it back to the good old days, so be it. That's a fucking fight anybody should be willing to fight if they truly believe they're just, right? But yeah, it'll continue to play out, and I think on the backdrop of the increased protests and Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, a little flag off that we're
Listen, all I'm saying is I want these same people, because like you said, you nailed it. All the people who concocted this, who pushed this, are all Ivy League intelligentsia for the most part. I want to see them push the Biden administration to do things along this line. I want to see them actually do and say things that threaten power, other than just talking about, oh, we want to do this in education. Play it out. Play it out to its
Whoa.
full extent. That's all I'm saying.
I want to know. I want to know what Hunter Biden thinks on critical race theory.
Oh God, bro, he probably knows all about it. He probably knows all about it. He probably felt like he could say that shit because he had a couple plates at the barbecue.
Yeah, that was
You know what I
wild.
mean? That's probably what it
Can
was.
can we leave it on that
Talking
note?
about, go search Hunter Biden Hennessy.
Oh my
prices.
God, Jesus.
It was
He
awesome.
he must have been high.
So fucking cool. So cool. Well, and I say that just because it's like it's so great to just like, yeah, he's crazy and like whatever, like but it's like the one humanizing thing to me about Biden. Like he has a son that's a complete fuck up, and like that one, that voicemail call that he probably leaked where he was like, I love you.
Yeah.
Even though his son's like smoking crack in a bathtub, having sex with prostitutes, getting like shalom tattooed on the back of his arm, like with a girl.
Didn't he get with Bo's wife too?
Dropping the bomb. Yeah, banging his brother's wife.
Jesus.
All that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, guy's a mess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice change of pace from all these pristine children. I mean, Trump's kids were just oily and gross. That wasn't like, they were different too, but it was like in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Hunter Biden is sort of the perfect presidential child for this moment that America's in, where America.
It's true.
We're in the closing part of this act and need to start a new
Yeah.
one. And everyone doesn't want to be like, no, we're still this, we're still great. 9/11, all this just crazy shit that we've built an American identity around that no longer exists. And people refuse to come
Yeah,
together.
I mean, man is inherently flawed. Hunter Biden's a good example of that.
Yep, yep.
All right, I don't think I've anything left in me.
No,
That was a good
I hope
freestyle
nobody.
Friday.
I hope no one wants to cancel me for. Sorry guys. I just
Can't cancel you, bro.
I get apprehensive.
We have our own live stream. They can't cancel us. Our viewers would be up in uproar. So that was episode 18. Be on the lookout. We do have some guests lined up over the next few weeks. Won't tease anything just yet, but we'll definitely be hopping on midweek to chop it up with you guys as we continue to refine this process, both from a technical standpoint and from a delivery standpoint. I think it's only going to get better. As always, we appreciate anybody who's tuning in, anybody who's reaching out to Ramon and I and telling us they're enjoying the podcast. If that is the case, please share it and talk about it with other people. And we'd like to have some frank conversations with not just people who are running for office, but also people who have an opinion and have a viewpoint, because ultimately, the majority of conversations me and Ramon have start off from one thought, and we could just continue to kind of work through our thought process while we're chatting on a pre-production call, which is very, very valuable, because we kind of speak from an unfiltered, no pun intended, standpoint, which allows us to explore different topics, and it's enjoyable. And I like getting into these conversations with Ramon, but I like getting into these conversations with anybody who's willing to talk about their views and be open to listening to other ones. And that's what America should be striving towards. And that, things like the 1619 Project, things like, you name it, any cultural issue that seems to be dividing people, let's take a step back and have a chat about it properly, and stop this fucking purity test on every single topic.
Yeah, man.
That's where I'm like, fuck that.
Yeah, man. Anything and everything should be discussed that needs be. And yeah, like Patter said, if you don't even need a webcam. If you want to call into the show and talk about a specific topic, even if it's just one thing, you want to do 5 minutes.
We'll do it live.
Yeah, we'll do it live. Fuck it. I know that we want to keep doing more midweek stuff, and things have been hectic. Stuff's calmed down for me a lot, so I know that I'm gonna try to do one this week. But yeah, send the show. Our email is foreignanddomesticpr@gmail.com, or you can message us on Facebook or drop a comment in a YouTube live or anything like that. There's a bunch of different ways to get a hold of us. You guys want to hop on the show? We can do some talk radio stuff. You don't even have to have a camera.
Yep.
Like I said, you can call right in on Skype, whatever.
Joey from New Jersey, you're live.
There you go. Yep. We're gonna get some plants in the audience first. Some folks that we know and that want to talk about stuff before.
Yeah.
But I think get the ball rolling. I think we just need to get one. We'll get an unfaced person on a Skype call, just talking.
Yep.
And maybe we'll break the gate here.
Yep. Love it. All right. It is Friday. The weekend has landed. Everybody enjoy their weekend. Get outside. Get some sunshine, fresh air. Do what you like to do. Or just sit inside. If you like to do that too, whatever. I don't care. Leave me alone. All right, lads. Appreciate your time.